In this video, we're going to go over section 7.3 of your workbook. It's page 96. So we're going to now factor trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is going to not be 1, so that we have a little more work to do to figure out how we can factor these things. So the first method I'm going to show you is factor by grouping using the box method, and that's where we split apart. We find two numbers, p and q, whose sum is b and whose product is ac. Remember, I started referring to that back in section 7.2, even though the book didn't word it that way. They just said c, but I always want you to think of a times c, because we do have to account for that. In section 7.2, a was just happened to be 1. So it was the same as AC was the same as C. Step 2, rewrite the expression so that the middle term is split into two terms, P and Q, and then do factor by grouping or in the box. And then step 4 is verify by finding the product. So let's take a look here. We are going to want to look at example 7.19, factor 3x squared plus 2x minus 5. So A is 3, so we have AC. A is 3, and C is actually negative 5. So we're looking at negative 15 as our AC. Now we have to find two numbers, P and Q, that when we add them up, we sum to B. So we're looking at that plus B. They add to B. Okay, so maybe writing plus, maybe we'll just say add to B. So it's real clear. I'm not adding on B. I'm just saying what factors of negative 15, when I add them together, will give me B, which in this case is negative 2. Okay, so AC equals negative 15, B equals negative 2. So let's start working with some numbers here. So we could pick like negative 15 and 1 would be a choice. Remember, we have to have opposite signs because we have a negative. So we could do negative 15 and 1, but if I'm going to add those together here, I'm certainly not going to get negative 2, right? I'm going to get negative 15. So let's bring it closer together, factor pairs that are closer. So that's out. Then I'm going to have, let's try negative 5 and 3. If I were to add those together, I would get negative 2. And that's what I'm looking for. So now what I have to do is take these two. I can't just pop them in the skeleton like I do for trial and error, or like I did in section 7.2. I have to be much more careful with that. So I'm going to rewrite this polynomial as 3x squared minus 5x plus 3x minus 5. So that's a critical step here. You have to write that split apart and then use factor by grouping. You cannot do, so what would be wrong would be just to go, x minus 5, x plus 3. That would not work. Okay, because we would not get the right answer. We would get x squared minus 5x plus 3x minus 15. We would get our middle term, but this one would be wrong. Okay, so we don't want to do that. So we have to split apart. We can't just pop in. So we're going to do our factor by grouping process, or you could put it in a box like I've showed you before. I'll do that in the next one. So here we would pull out our what's common to both of these. Now I might want to rearrange these. Actually, the way I wrote them, I don't have as much common here. So let's see what I want to do. Let me rewrite this. 3x squared plus 3x minus 5x minus 5. That way, when I'm grouping, I have things that are common. So you've experienced that before, and there's definitely some videos to help you with that. So I'm going to pull out the 3x, and then that leaves me with x plus 1 in parentheses there. Okay. Then I'm going to pull out, remember I usually like to write this as plus negative 5 there. So I can pull out a negative 5, and that's going to leave me with x plus 1. Now watch your signs here, because if I have negative 5 times x, I get the negative 5x. Negative 5 times a positive 1, I get the negative 5. So I do have a match on my greatest common factor there. And then what's left goes in the parentheses, and this would be my answer, and I do definitely need to check it. And I would get, first would be 3x squared. My last would be, or actually let's just do first, outside, inside first, and then outside would be minus 5x, insides are plus 3x, and last are minus 5. So when I do this middle term, I definitely get the minus 2x, but I'm also good here with my 3x squared. So this will match what I started with, so that's a good answer. It works. Where here, it was close, but I didn't have that first term. Okay. Now this one's a little trickier, example 7.20, because we have the y squared thing on the end. But the same kind of process, but you have to account for that y also. So we're going to have AC would be the 3 times negative 14. So that comes out to be negative 42. Okay, so I want factors of negative 42 that add up to 19. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add up to negative 19 to get that middle term. So I'm just going to start looking at things like negative 42 and, 1. Obviously, that's a no, right? Let's try negative 21 and 2. If I were to add those, I would get negative 19. So, oh, I actually need a positive 19. Whoops. So I was looking at the 14. So that's a plus 14. I need a plus 14 here. Okay, so just to be clear, that is not going to work then, but I'm really close, so I can just change my signs. 21 times negative 2 will also give me negative 42, but if I add those up, I do in fact get positive 19. So these are my two factors that I want to use and split this back apart. So now I'm going to rewrite this as 3x squared plus 21xy. Don't forget I have to write exactly what's there too for the variables. 21xy minus 2xy and then minus 14y squared. Okay, then I'm going to do factor by grouping, and I told you I would put it in the box. So I'm actually going to do that over to the side here. All right, and let's see how we can throw these in here. I can do 3x squared and 21xy, that's plus. Then I have a minus 2xy and a minus 14y y squared. Now we might have to play with our positioning and our ordering, but we'll do that as we go. So now I'm going to look at what's common to this first row. So I have 3x squared and I have a 21xy. So I can pull out a 3x on that. And then I know 3x times what gives me 3x squared. So I know an x will go up top there. I can also look at now what's common here. So once I get 1, it helps me a lot. But would just be the x, right? So if I need to get this back, x times what equals negative 2xy, I could put in there a negative 2y. Okay, then I can look at this column, 21xy and negative 14y squared. What's common to both of those? I'm going to try a positive 7 first and see how that works. 7y is what I would need to try. And then I'm just going to double check. 7y times negative 2y gives me negative 14y squared. 7y times the 3x gives me plus 21xy. So there I have my binomials. So then I'm just going to, put parentheses kind of around them there. It's kind of weird on the vertical one, but my answer is going to be 3x minus 2y times x plus 7y. Okay, now I want to check it. Always check. So I get my first will be 3x squared. My outside is plus 21xy. My inside is minus 2xy. And my last is minus 14y squared. And then I go ahead and just make sure that all works out to have the right sign and everything. Minus 14y squared. So this is a match where I have this and this is a match. I'm going to erase that there, but that's good. It checks. So it takes a little bit of practice, quite a bit of practice till you get quicker at it. So you might want to slow the video down or try it on your own, kind of pause and then go back and check and those kind of things. Well, a lot of students really like this factor by grouping method, especially putting it in a box, but it does get a little cumbersome after a while and it takes a little longer. So if you can kind of embrace or at least try and practice a lot, the trial and error method, by the time you get to your college algebra and definitely your pre-calculus, you should be able to do this pretty fluently. So keep practicing throughout. We always review it, but once you get it, it's usually easier to see and you can just pop right into the skeletons of these. So my caution is don't mix methods, okay? Don't mix this with previous grouping method, okay? You really have to just set it up differently. Where in 7-2, if you did that and kind of forgot, because your coefficient was 1, it would still work out okay, but here you got to be super careful. You can't take that grouping one and mix it steps in with this or vice versa. So here we're going to look at the tips. So if you have binomials that have the same sign throughout, then you're going to have a plus situation in your binomials, all positive. If you have a minus for your middle term, you'll have negatives because you have to have the same sign. So your last, because your last term, your C is positive. So you'd have to have a negative times a negative to get that middle term when you add them. If you have a negative and a negative as your signs in your polynomial, you're going to have a negative and a plus, opposite signs. Same for if you have a plus and a negative. So anytime you have that C as a negative, you're going to have one positive and one negative sign. Now, for the last two cases, the binomials with subtraction and addition is to be determined by the student when foiling each combination. Also note that M and P and Q are all coefficients and are numbers, respectively. They're not variables. So when we're talking about this middle term, that M represents a number, the coefficient to X. All right, and the P and the Q are numbers as well. So if you do have like an X and a Y as your variables in there, you have to account for that separately, just like we did in the other problem. So I'll leave that there for you. Example 7.21, factor by trial and error, or sometimes we call it guess and check or intuitive method or skeleton. 3x squared plus 11x plus 10. So what I need to do is the same kind of thinking. I have to think, okay, what combinations when I, put all this together are going to give me the correct middle term. But in this case, I'm going to pop right into my skeleton. So you pop right into binomial times binomial and not grouping. Okay, you're not going to split apart the middle term in this case. You're just going to write your parentheses right next to each other like that. No plus in there on this one, where before you did have a plus or a minus. So that's really the key difference in what I mean by don't mix your methods. That'll really mess you up. So I'm going to have this 3x squared will have to be split apart some way for my first term, right? So I'm doing a kind of reverse FOIL. So I have my first, I'm going to try 3x and x. You never would have like a 3x squared and a 1. It always splits apart with an x times x. It just depends how your coefficients split apart. So you're going to do factors of 3. So I'm doing a 3 here and a 1 here. So then I have the same signs here, plus plus. So then I'm going to have this situation here, all positive. So I know I can go ahead and fill that in. And all right, so I've got my first 3x times x will give me the 3x squared. And the possibilities for the ends, I have like a 10 and a 1. I have a 5 and a 2. That's about it. Or I could go 2 and 5. Or I could go actually 1 and 10 here. So the order kind of matters because I have this 3 to consider now, where in the previous section I didn't. So now I'm going to look at how this lays out. So I have an 11x here, so it's kind of big, but not huge. So I probably don't want to put a 10 here because then that would give me a 30. That's pretty large. And I know I'm adding these things together. I don't have any opposite signs to subtract off. So let's try doing 5 and a 2 like that and just see how it comes out. Just check it. So I'm going to check here. I'll get a 2x. And then if I check this, I'm just checking the middle term right now because I already adjusted and checked my ends. So I have a 2x and then I have a 15x. That gives me a 17x. So that's too big. So that one's out, right? So now I'm just going to get rid of that. I need to try some more things here. So I have 3x plus a, let's try switching them up, plus 5 and then x plus 2 and see how that works out. That'll give me a 5x and a 6x. And when I add those together, because they're both positive, I get the 11x that I need. So there is my answer. And then just double check that your ends are good. So I have 3x times x, give me 3x squared. 5 times 2 does give me the 10, and then my middle term I already figured out there. So trial and error can be really nice. It's kind of like a puzzle, kind of like Sudoku. You have to kind of think like, oh, what are my possibilities? What can I fill in? And then you might have to switch things up. So try it. I know it's hard. Some of them, especially if they have bigger numbers for that lead coefficient, and then you have more choices to pick from. This one we only had a few. So just give it a go. I'm going to stop this video here. This will be part 1 of section 7.3, and then there'll be one more video following. Have a great day.